In my time on YouTube, I've watched far too many videos of film critics, whose content I thoroughly enjoy and whose opinions I generally tend to agree with, saying something along the lines of, "I'm sick of Hollywood putting messages in my movies. I don't want my entertainment telling me how to live my life. Film shouldn't be trying to send a message, it should just be trying to be fun." I appreciate the sentiment as I understand where they're coming from, but I find that all too common complaint to be worth examining a little more closely to make sure we're not saying something we don't really mean. Usually it's expressed in regard to woke political messaging, with which Hollywood has become so oversaturated that even many of those who don't oppose such left-wing ideological principles have begun to find them exhausting. So is that all we mean? Do we just not like these particular messages? And if that's the case, is it because they're so overused and heavy-handed, or is it simply because we don't agree with them? Now, for some who lament overt messaging in their entertainment, this may be all they mean, in which case their criticism doesn't hold a lot of weight, but I think many of the loudest voices have much deeper criticism to give, and here I intend to strip away the assumptions of what messaging even means in my attempt to get to the heart of Hollywood's problem with messages in movies, and ask, should movies even have messages? Now in this video, I'm going to briefly touch on a lot of issues without going into them in much depth, because I want to focus on the particular issue of the kinds of messages conveyed in cinema and storytelling in general, so don't expect me to get too deep into the message itself and all the problems with Hollywood's twisted ideologies. That's a whole other monster of a topic that's been delved into countless times by far better YouTubers than me. I'm just here to offer my 2 cents on things about which I find I have something worth saying. So if you're new to the channel, I'm just thinking out loud, so if you like my brain vomit, you know where the like and subscribe buttons are. Now without further ado, let's dive into it. So I've got 3 major points to make here, and I'm saving the best for last, so I'll try to get through the first 2 pretty quickly. In my opinion, these first couple points don't get to the heart of the issue and are not my thesis here, but they're valid arguments worth mentioning. 1. Messages don't inherently make movies worse, but prioritizing them over good storytelling does. This is one of the biggest arguments I hear from critics of woke entertainment, that current Marvel and Star Wars, for example, have gotten so bad because the writers are more concerned with their message than their story. I believe this is true, but it also goes both ways. It's the same reason why The Daily Wire, for example, struggles to make entertaining movies, because they're so preoccupied with making a point that they forget how to make their movies funny or exciting. It's also why their occasional hits are successful. Those are the times when they're able to just focus on telling a good story over just bashing on the left at every chance they get. 2. Know your audience. Making original content with messages targeted at a particular audience that will appreciate it is far different from using an existing franchise as a platform for messaging and then blaming the audience for not appreciating it. Christian movies, for example, are focused at a Christian audience who will appreciate their messages. Obviously, they hope to reach and inspire as many people as possible, but they don't expect people who don't agree with or like their overtly religious themes to be entertained by them, because that's not their point. Those movies have messages, but they don't try to force that message on, say, the audiences of raunchy rom-coms like Sex and the City and then blame them for not liking it. They know their audience. Meanwhile, Hollywood writers use their positions in big franchises to preach to all the white male privileged bigots they expect to pay them, and the executives who hire them think they can bring in more female viewers to watch their action movies by forcing feminist messages on their primarily male audience. That's not how anything works. You can get away with preaching feminist ideas in Barbie because that's not trying to appeal to a male audience, and no one cares. But we're going to notice it when you force it into our superhero movies. Now you may ask, what's the problem with it in Disney's remakes of princess cartoons? Well, that goes back to my first point, but it also leads into my third, which is, what do we mean by messages? We throw that word around a lot, but what does it really mean? When we say we don't want messages in our movies, does that mean we don't want movies to have anything to say? Do we not want to learn or feel anything? I'm sure that's what some people mean, but most of us love movies that have something worthwhile to say. I think most of us have more of a problem with being talked down to and preached at. So here I want to make a distinction between 2 very different kinds of messages: propaganda versus themes. Let's look at the dictionary real quick to define these terms. I found a few definitions of each word, though I'm not sure any of these completely encapsulate every use. Theme can be defined as the subject of a talk, a piece of writing, a person's thoughts, or an exhibition. A topic, or the main subject that is being discussed or described in a piece of writing, a movie, etc., or an idea that recurs in or pervades a work of art or literature. Meanwhile, propaganda is defined as information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or point of view, or a message that is intended primarily to serve the interests of the messenger. It may also be defined as the spreading of information in order to influence public opinion and to manipulate other people's beliefs. But a quote I've heard used to concisely describe the difference between these kinds of messages in the context of popular entertainment is that well-used themes make you think, while propaganda tells you what to think. Let me give you a couple popular examples to showcase this difference. To prove we're not just talking about political messages, let's look at the Avatar movies, which have no woke propaganda to be found. I actually like these movies more than a lot of people, but I do agree with the critics that the messages in these movies are not subtle or nuanced. It's pounded into you that everything Western and industrial is bad. Capitalism, militarism, and technology in general, apparently, are all evil. As Rousseau would say, we should follow the noble savages and return to nature, where everybody lives in harmony and sings Hakuna Matata. There's barely any complexity to make this a thematic discussion. It's really just propaganda for this overly simplistic anti-colonialism message. Meanwhile, we have Joker, the first one, obviously. A film that definitely has things to say, and whose messages could very easily be read as extremely left-wing in their scathing depiction of the privileged upper class and the state of capitalist America. And yet, because it presents these ideas within the fascinating character study of Arthur Fleck, and doesn't feel like it's beating you over the head or pointing the finger at you, at least not enough to take you out of the experience, it's widely loved across the political spectrum. It handles sensitive ideas with some degree of tact and nuance. It feels like it's presenting reality, if perhaps an exaggeratedly awful version of reality, rather than preaching, and it's organic to the story rather than feeling forced to make a point. That's the difference between propaganda and theme. Now, I know I said I only had 3 points, but I decided this next part was kind of its own separate topic, so I'll make it a bonus point. This is sort of getting into the message, since for this point I'm mainly thinking of the cheap slew of garbage coming from the big money machines, but I'm not getting political. My final point is that I don't believe the writers making the woke content we're complaining about actually have any real message to give. The famous words of Macbeth describe this content best. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. There are many individuals in Hollywood with many different motivations, and I don't claim to be able to read any of their minds, but I believe that most people in these studios don't really care about the message. They're just chasing the money, which leads them to follow the trends and appeal to the loudest audience, causing them to inject identity politics into everything mainstream. Meanwhile, I think most of those hired to write these projects are just trying to make as much noise as possible on these subjects in the hope that it makes them look smart and progressive. But this postmodernist paint job they slap over everything is just a cover, a distraction from the complete lack of any substance beneath, because they have nothing original or intelligent to say. I mean, what are the Marvels, She-Hulk, The Acolyte, or Rings of Power actually saying with all their obnoxious female power fantasy, heavy-handed focus on diversity, and half-hearted attempts at moral ambiguity? See, most of us don't really hate messages in our movies in general. The messages we hate are shallow and pointless, and the movies peddling them are trying to pander to an obnoxious audience or follow an agenda. In fact, I'd say the problem isn't movies having messages, it's that most movies don't really have any meaningful messages. Beneath the thin veneer of progression, empowerment, and inclusivity, what are these movies really saying? These movies are often the dumbest because there is no real message. We need more movies with genuinely meaningful themes, regardless of whether or not we agree with them, because the art of cinema should be more than entertainment. It should be a conversation. I also want to note, as I wrap up here, that entertainment and art are not necessarily the same thing, and while they are certainly not mutually exclusive, movies can be trying to be one more than the other, and some audiences just want one or the other. So if you want to be entertained with no conscious appreciation for artistry or deeper meaning, you likely won't enjoy anything with overt messages, but that's okay because nothing is for everyone. But the most tactfully handled messages can be appreciated by most, if not all, viewers, even those who just want to be entertained. I think even those who just go to the theater or sit on the couch for pure brain candy can get something from a film that says something whether they realize it or not. The most classic blockbusters are so beloved because they are so entertaining while managing to say something that makes them stick with us, even if we don't know why. Why do we love Star Wars? Maybe it's just lightsabers, spaceships, and Jar Jar Binks. Okay, maybe not the last one, but I think it's the timeless tale of love, corruption, hope, and redemption that brings us back again and again. And that's what Disney will never understand. But what do you think? What makes certain messages more annoying than others? And do you think they always affect the quality of the movie? Is there some key difference I missed or additional point in this argument to be made? Let me know in the comments. I look forward to continuing the discussion with you there. Until next time, never stay silent.